Hi Scott, how you going?
Hey, good. How you doing, Pato?
Yeah, really good, thanks. Thanks for coming on and congratulations on your win for Team USA. I guess it was a couple of weeks ago now.
Yeah, just a little over 2 weeks since the start of the race. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So it
yeah,
was
yeah.
actually
It was fun. It was a good time. So
yeah, yeah. It was actually you were actually the first international guest I ever had on the podcast when the podcast was just new, and that was just almost 2 years ago now. So time sure does fly, doesn't it?
yeah. It was a minute ago, but yeah. I mean, it's the podcast. I mean, it's really you've done a great job with it. It's really grown and since then. So I mean, I listen pretty frequently. So you've had all the top backyard runners on, and I like tuning in just to listen to all of them. I mean, like Bill Gore and Harvey Lewis, and so
Yeah.
the last one I listened to I think was Levi Yoder. So
Oh yeah.
it
Yeah.
it's fun to kind of like hear everything that was going on with him before catching up with him again in person. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's a great podcast. I'm a fan of it.
Oh,
So
thanks.
happy to be on again.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean it's been really good. I mean, I can't believe how open and friendly and willing everyone is to come on. I didn't expect it would be this good.
Yeah. Maybe it speaks something to the whole backyard community. We're
Yeah,
pretty we're pretty open and friendly community for the most part, as far at least in my experience.
yeah. So I understand since last time you were on, you've actually had a child, like you've added to your family. Is that right?
Yeah. So our youngest now is just it's about a year and a half. So
Right.
yeah. Actually, I guess it wasn't too long after when I was on the podcast last time that that was our fourth boy.
Yeah.
So we got four boys at home. The youngest is one, and the oldest is 12, and a couple in the middle there. So
Yeah.
they keep us busy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, congratulations as well.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah,
Um,
because I think it was when we talked last is after Capitol, and
mm,
so then it was a few months later. I was at Biggs for the first time,
yeah.
and my wife was pretty far along with her pregnancy at that point. But
Yeah.
we hadn't told but too many people yet at that point. It was still pretty secret news.
Yeah. 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 So when I had Frank the Tank on the podcast a while ago after Biggs last year, he actually mentioned that you're someone that he relates to a lot as you've found a balance between your running and your family. I mean, he actually said that you're the American tank. So, how did you, or did it, was
That's
it
a
hard?
high compliment coming from Frank the Tank. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. It's funny because we messaged back and forth on Strava quite a bit before we actually met in person at Biggs last year. So meeting him in person was really cool, and then meeting him and running with him, getting to know him a bit there. Like he's just such an awesome guy. He's like so positive the whole time. So it was really cool to meet to know him beforehand and then get to know him in person a bit.
Yeah.
And it's funny. Most of the stuff we chatted about before we messaged on Strava, it was either just like about the what distances, what miles we were building up for bigs, and then it was also about like what music we listened to and had on our playlist. But
Right.
we both had a lot of no effects. So
Right. Yeah. 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 He mentioned that he listened to a lot of No Effects.
yeah. So that was a lot of the talk while we were running too, like what bands we listened to and stuff. So it was really fun running with him. Really enjoyed the miles with him.
Mm. How did you find how did you find the right balance between like running and having like a four young kids?
So much of that credit goes to my wife, really. I mean, it's having a partner that understands, like why you're doing this, and that you're not crazy for doing it. Although it may look to like a lot of people like you're crazy, and I don't know. she supports like all my wild aspirations, to chase this whole backyard thing. And just running bigs had been a dream of mine for a long time. So just to make it there, I felt like I was really accomplishing a lot. And she's been supportive the whole time. I wouldn't be able to get out and do the training runs that I need to do to prepare for it without her support, without
Mm.
her understanding. And it's just it's a lot of like give and take, just like I know she's got her priorities and I got mine, and we always just work with each other. I feel like we work with each other really well to make sure we both are happy and getting what we need and what we want out of life. And I think it's just having a really good relationship with your significant other, and she cares about me trying to chase my dreams and accomplish my goals, and the same goes for her for me. So and that's it. I know that probably sounds really oversimple, but it's like, what do you got? Yeah, when you talk about having four kids and one of them's one, we got a 1-year-old, a 4-year-old, and then a 10 and a 12-year-old. It's a lot. It's a huge time. A lot of time demands there from between school activities, extracurricular activities, and then obviously a 1-year-old requires a lot of time and care.
Mm.
So yeah, we're constantly just trying to take care of everything efficiently so that we can still have time for each other and time for us to chase our own like personal goals. But
Mm.
that's probably an oversimple answer, but that's kind of both of our what drives both of us, and it works. So
Yeah, awesome. I saw that I think it must have been your oldest son. He's just started cross country as well. So that must have been you must have been pretty proud of that.
yeah, so I was so pumped for it. So
Yeah.
pumped. He just wrapped up the last season. They just had their last meet last week, and and I mean, I'm sure a lot of people won't believe it or won't think I was at least suggesting to him to like go out and try cross country, but I wasn't pushing it at all, and it was just he wanted to try something besides baseball for their school sports, and he decided he was going to try cross country, and he told me that, and I was actually pretty surprised because I he hadn't even really been talking about it, and it's just all of a sudden I'm going to join the cross country team. I was like, well, okay, that's cool. I'm pumped. I'm glad. Like, and yeah, he enjoyed it. He enjoyed the practices. Went on a few runs with me to train outside of practice, and he had a pretty good season. And he wants to go back and do it again next year with the team. So yeah, I'm super pumped about that. And on top of it, he said he wants to try running a backyard next summer with me,
Oh,
because
awesome.
to go off on a little tangent, we might get to it later in the podcast, but him and my other older son, they both crewed me at Bob's Big Timber backyard earlier this summer in August. And so after crewing me, they got to experience a backyard firsthand. And now that he's been running, he's like, well, I think I could do at least a few yards. And I was like, well, that sounds like a good time that we could find a backyard that works for us, and you could run whatever 2-3 yards, whatever you feel like comfortable with. And then once you decide to wrap up your day, then you can crew me until I can't go anymore, and we'll just make a fun weekend out of it. So
Yeah.
I'm thrilled. He's like kind of found a bit of a passion for running on his own, and just like what kind of adventures that's going to lead to for both of us in the future. So I couldn't be happier about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. As far as other runners go, I mean, we mentioned Frank the Tank before, but are there any particular, or is there a particular runner who comes to mind that you've got an extra level of like admiration for, or who you look up to?
I mean, there's a whole list of them. So I mean, I feel kind of bad naming a few because I'm going to
Yeah.
leave so many people out. But I mean, like guys like Phil Gore, obviously. I mean, I think every backyard runner looks up to him. I mean, what he does is amazing, and the kind of like yard times he can crank off when he's got hundreds of miles on his legs. And then I just saw, I think he posted on Instagram just today that he went and ran like a 50K pace in one of his buddies. And it's just like, dude is like it's like so amazing what he pulls off. So I mean, obviously like that's inspiring and someone to look up to. But I mean, as far as like then on the American team, I mean, I could say everyone on the American team that I ran with inspires me in some way. I mean, like Harvey Lewis. I mean, I was a fan of Harvey Lewis before I ever met him, so he was been high on the list for me for years. And then after getting to run with him a couple times as teammates on Team USA, especially this year, I ran a lot more with him this year. Really felt like I spent more time running with him and getting to chat with him and get to know him a little bit better. But really, just like he's like super down to earth and approachable as a person. Like his whole online social media demeanor, it's true. It's like he really is that person, which is really cool to find out when you've like followed someone long enough and to meet him in person like that. So he's definitely high on the list. And one to name one other one is Jen Russo. I mean, just I've run with her enough times that I feel like I've gotten to know her a little bit better just from all the miles we shared together and competing with each other. You know, like being the last two at Capitol 2 years in a row, which was kind of, I mean, the fact that it happened is kind of amazing that it came down to the same two people for 2 years. But spending, you know, competing against her in that format at Capitol 2 years in a row, and just like running with her as a teammate for a couple of years and at the individual at Bigs, like I've seen her push through things that would have taken other people out much earlier. And she's got just so much like fight in her to keep going when things seem hopeless. I find that super inspiring from her. She's got more grit than probably almost any other backyard runner I've met and run with. And I mean, I hope that's not insulting to other backyard runners, but she's just got a level of grit that it's hard to describe until you're like seeing her struggle through this, and the fact that she just has like zero quit in her. Like whether she's coming in with 1 or 2 minutes consistently, she just refuses to give in. She's going back out to give another yard a shot no matter what. It's really inspiring to see her do that.
It was definitely something that I noticed watching the live stream of Biggs last year. Like you saw that she just kept on going out again and again and again. She only had 1 or 2 minutes between loops, and you could tell that it wasn't easy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she was struggling the first night. Even the weather got really cold and she was having some breathing issues. And then the second day it was hot and dusty. It hadn't rained in so long, so we were kicking up a lot of dust. So I think the dusting was affecting her breathing too. And then the second night she was feeling nauseous anytime she ran. So she was mostly power hiking that night, all that second night, making it in with like 1 or 2 minutes, and then turning around and going right back out and doing it again. And I thought she was going to make it through the night and at least make it to the third day, but I think she timed out like on the second to last, maybe it was either the last or second to last night loop. I think she timed out on, but she put up a heck of a fight to keep on racking up all the yards she did for our team.
Yeah. That run at Capitol last year when you did 75 yards to finish as the last one standing, that must have given you a fair bit of confidence going into Biggs last year for the individual world championships.
Yeah, it did, maybe too much, because Biggs last year really didn't go how I wanted it to. And I haven't figured out exactly what went wrong with me. I was having digestive issues last year at Biggs, and I don't know. I think after I had such a good day at Capitol, you know, leading up to it, running with Jen and hitting a new PR, I just I had really high expectations, and I think I put a lot of pressure on myself to really perform really well last year at Biggs. And I think maybe that is part of what like kind of got to me, was just the extra pressure I put on myself to hit another big PR. So I think it was kind of some of it was self-induced, just undue like extra stress I was putting on myself. And you know, I was making it work, even though I was having like some digestive issues, which started early in the race. But after a couple days of that, you know, and just feeling like I was taking like an extra so many yards, I was having to make a pit stop. And so then it was like, well, that's an extra, 3 to 5 minutes. And when you only got a few minutes between yards, it's like, well, you got to make that time up. So after just a few days of that, and then it just felt like I was like really, pushing the pace for so long that it just kind of, I think it all caught up to me on the third day. And I eventually like just had to hammer in one lap to make it in. And then I just like, I went out for the next one. I was just like, yeah, it isn't happening. I destroyed my legs. So,
Mm.
so yeah, it wasn't the race I was hoping for last year, but thankfully things went better for me this year.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, right. I part of it I think is just the mental state. Like I had a lot of confidence after coming away from Capital last year, going into Bigs,
Mm.
and this year I was going into Bigs with doing two backyards that did not turn out how I want. The
Mm.
last 2 years going into Bigs, I was coming off of PRs, so it's almost like I kind of went into it with like, oh, my work for the year is done. Maybe I don't have to work as hard at Bigs. And this year, I was like, well, my work for this year is not done. I need a good performance. I think just having like kind of that extra push mentally to like really know that this is your last backyard of the year, to have a good backyard was really enough to kind of like make me push a little harder and fight through some of the discomfort that I went through this year.
Mm. Do you do you think there was? I mean, after the result at Biggs last year, and just for the people listening, you finished 32nd in the world and did 57 yards. But after that result, did you like feel more determined straight away to go back to Biggs and get back into the backyard ultra game, or did it take some time to find your backyard ultra mojo again?
Yeah, I think it took a little time because I still had the goal was still to go back to Bigs and be on Team USA and try and have a strong performance for the team. But it took me a little bit because I started the year with a 48 hour instead of doing another straight to a backyard. So I had some goals to do a 48-hour race and try and see how far I could go there. And then I had Capital backyard and Bob's Big Timber backyard lined up before Bigs again this year. And both of those were, you know, I guess my motivation for both of them was kind of just to get back into like preparing myself for a backyard and to make sure I had my spot on Team USA. I thought with the 75 that I had from the previous year at Capital, that was good enough for at large. I thought I was pretty safe, but I figured if I was going to lose that spot, it was going to be at Capital. So I at least wanted to make sure I had, a fighting chance at hanging on to my spot on the team if it came to that.
Mm.
But yeah, then Bob's Big Timber. Actually, that's kind of a stupid story why I signed up for it. It was actually after Biggs last year. I was sitting there after both Levi and I had timed out, and I was talking to him about Bob's Big Timber. He's like telling me how the race director hadn't given out any of these gold belt buckles for anyone who goes over 200 miles there. And so we had both just done 57 yards, and I was like, well, I bet if we signed up, we could we could get there.
Yeah.
So I kind of like made a commitment to sign up for it at that point, and then so I was like, yeah, it'd be a good reason, a good excuse to go out to Ohio and hang out with Levi for a few days and run a new backyard. It'd been so long since I'd run a different backyard course. I was kind of looking forward to a change and running a new backyard course. So there are a few other motivations for me going to Bob's other than just to, make sure I have a spot on the USA team.
Mm. I saw that there was a photo of you at Bob's, but I couldn't actually find any results of the race. So did you run the 200 miles there?
I came up short of 200 there. I think the final was I think it was around 180, 180 miles is when I stopped. I tapped out like midway through the second night.
Yeah.
Yeah, I started having some ankle and calf pain that flared up, and it was like I felt like it was something that I could have just like run through and push through, but I also knew I had training coming up for Bigs, and I didn't want to mess myself up too bad when knew I was going to have to get ready for Bigs, and I wanted to have a really good day at Bigs. So
Mhm.
so I decided to pull the plug with a few hours before the 200-mile mark.
Yeah, yeah, because it was only less than 2 months before Bigs, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was it was in August. I think it was like mid-August. So it was only a few months, and yeah, then we were off to Big. So
Yeah.
it was kind of tight to sneak that one in and then still get a good training block in before Bigs and still have a taper period.
Mm. So at Capital this year, you're actually going for 3 wins in a row. So were you really gunning for the three-peat, or were you more focused on just locking down a solid race?
The three-peat was the goal, yeah.
Yeah.
When I signed up earlier for Capital this year, and that was the main reason I signed up. I was like, that'd be pretty cool to win Capital 3 years in a row.
Yeah.
You know, it turned out it wasn't a good enough reason. um, nothing really went wrong for me at that race, other than the second afternoon. I just felt like my motivation fell off for what, and I can't really explain why. I just didn't feel like running a backyard anymore. I didn't feel like running anymore.
Mm.
My nutrition was good, hydration was good. I was eating, drinking well, no real issues, no serious pain or problems going on. But yeah, for whatever reason, just kind of like I didn't feel like doing it anymore. And when we got about halfway through the second night, things were hurting. It was getting tougher to get up and get moving in between yards. And when I started thinking about my reason for being there was just to like repeat a 3 victories for 3 consecutive years. I was just like, it's not a good enough reason to keep going. I wasn't feeling, I didn't have like a real competitive spirit going.
Mm.
And so I really don't have a good explanation other than I signed up thinking winning it 3 years in a row sounds cool, and it really didn't sound that great halfway through the second night.
Okay. Had you ever
I,
had?
I, think it, I think it ties into like, when everyone asks you why you do these things, it's like you really do have to have a good reason why, because if you don't, that's what happens the second night. It's just like, yeah, why am I doing this?
Yeah. Had you ever had an issue with like motivation during a race before, or was that the only time?
That really, that's about the first time it really sprung up, where I was just kind of like questioning why am I even putting myself through this?
Mm.
All the past races, I've always been pretty focused on being like, yeah, my goal is to push myself and go as far as possible here. And if that means I'm the last one, great. If it means I time out before, as long as I push myself to my limit, I'm happy.
Mm.
And but neither of those two happened at Capital. I was just like, I just decided I didn't want to do it anymore. And um, so yeah, I wasn't that's probably the backyard finish that I'm most disappointed with, and out of all my backyards. It's just because I really honestly felt like I just kind of quit there for no good reason other than didn't give myself a good reason to be there. So
Mm.
that's probably the most disappointing backyard finish I've had out of all the backyards I've run so far.
Mm. So you were going for the three-peat. Jen Russo actually ran it, and she actually did a three-peat of assists. And Levi Yoda, he was the last one standing. He keeps improving, doesn't he, Levi Yoda?
Yeah, he's got a lot of potential still, I think, to go even farther and go bigger than he has.
Yeah,
He's improved, I think, like nearly every race he's done, he's improved upon.
yeah.
So I actually I think it was the third night at Biggs this year. I apologized to him for pulling out so early in Capital and not sticking with him to run longer, because
Right.
I think he had a lot more in the tank at Capital. I think he would have broken 300 there if he had someone to push him.
Yeah.
Who knows how much farther he would have gone, because he was having like, it seemed like he was really having like one of those magical backyards where everything just is clicking, no major issues, nothing's going wrong. So it's kind of, I felt even after the fact, like feeling bad for myself for quitting how I quit. I felt bad that I didn't like keep running with Levi and give him a little bit more push to push himself to his limit, because I think his limit was quite a bit beyond what he did that day.
Mm. So I'm sure you've heard Laz say a few times that the best place to practice for the big trails is the Netherlands. No, I don't think you went to the Netherlands to practice, but you did go to Bob's. Is Bob's a good place to practice for the big trails?
You know, their day course does have some elevation change, but most of it's in the first mile.
Mm,
So I'm not sure exactly how it compares as far as like total elevation change to bigs, but it's definitely more technical than the Capital Backyard Ultra course. At least that first mile, where you've got it. There's a pretty steep descent and then a pretty good climb out. Then after that, more it's mostly flat and non-technical through the woods. But I'd say it's better preparation for bigs than Capital is, because
mm,
Capital's trail course is it's pretty forgiving trail course. And I don't like none of it I would call like really technical. A lot of it is almost like rail trail type stuff with a few hills. So I think Capital is probably not the best place to prepare for it, other than it's probably going to go some distance there, because that's been one of the backyards in the U.S. that has pretty consistently been pretty competitive and gone pretty far.
yeah.
But I'd say like comparatively, Bob's is a pretty good day course to prepare for bigs.
Mm, yeah. And I mean, most people listening would know that the Sat Champs is a team event, and this was your second time running for Team USA. And there looked to be a really nice mix of like first timers and seasoned veterans like yourself on the team. What was the team vibe like this year?
I think I'd say it felt more like a team this year than
Mm,
2 years ago. And the only reason I say that is I think 2 years ago most of us all were meeting each other for the first time at the starting corral.
mm,
This year I think nine of us were previous team members from 22.
mm,
So I think even like preparing to, and on top of that, a lot of us ran with one another between those 2 years. Like I
mm.
ran with Keith V, Jen Russo, Levi, all at Capital. Did we have someone else? I might be forgetting someone else that we had on the team that was also at Capital.
Yeah, Ryan was there.
Oh yeah, Ryan was there. Yeah, Ryan's been at Capital a few years. I forget him because he usually runs such fast yards. I never see him. It's just like he's in the starting corral and then he's gone. And
Yeah,
like, I think I've run with. He's been at Capital a couple of years. I've run there, and I think I barely talked to him at all because he's like,
right.
the pace he runs for his yards is way faster than mine. So yeah, other than like if I catch him for a little bit before the race, that's about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought we definitely felt like more of a team going into it, just because we had met each other a couple years before and run together, and then so many of us had run together at a few other races between those 2 years that there's definitely more of like a team vibe going.
Mm.
So it made it more enjoyable. I think this year than 2 years ago to kind of like have more of a team feel going starting the race.
Yeah, cool. And from a personal point of view, I mean, how do you run these team events differently from your normal backyard ultra?
I still go into it with the same goal. I mean, just to like push myself as far as I can. I think that's the best way to do it, regardless of whether it's team or not. Because I
Mm,
mean, honestly, it's like whether it's team event or if it's strictly individual. And I know lads like maybe not so much anymore, but like in their earlier backyard years, it was like always like he really kind of like stressed how it's an individual sport. Like I think I've heard the term blood sport a few times used, and that there can only be one last person standing. Like it kind of like presents this very like brutal blood sport type idea. Um, but I mean I think for me it's like still it's always the same goal to like push myself to my limit, and whether it's a team competition or an individual, I think the benefit is still there either way. Because even if it's a team competition, if I'm pushing myself to my limit to go as far as I possibly can, that's going to benefit the team for me to get in as many yards as possible.
yeah.
So so it's really the same mentality. It's just you know, with the team, you rather than feeling like you're one person closer to being the last one standing when one of your teammates drops out, it's like a little bit of a gut punch, because then it's like, oh well, we lost one of our team members, and how's that going to compare to all the other countries that are running? Like, are we now, are we losing our lead? Are the other is Belgium running away with this again?
Yeah.
Because yeah, it is different, like in the moment, because you still have like, because you're thinking more of like where the team standing is versus just how many people are left running with you.
Yeah, and I can imagine like because there is an out and back at the beginning of the Bigs course on the road. I mean, you like was there more like encouragement as you were crossing paths with other runners and things like that? Like because you didn't want them, you wanted them to stick around for as long as possible.
Yeah, definitely. And it was, I mean, we had a ton of positive, like motivational talk between all the team members throughout the whole race. And I mean, there were a few times like on the little road out and back before we hit the trail on the day course. I mean, it's an out and back. So like there are a few times where we did high fives, the whole team like high five on the out and back there. So that was fun the few times that happened, and it kind of lifted everyone's spirits, and everyone, you know, kind of got a little motivation and picked up their pace a bit. And all the crews that we had there supporting us, I mean, they were great too, because they were always cheering for us every time. Because that's the cool thing about the Bigs Day course is when you do that little out and back, you go right back through that starting corral with the inflatable arch. So
Yeah.
all the crew there, they're cheering you when you take off from the corral, and then they're cheering you when you pass back through to the trail portion. So there were a couple times when they started a wave, like a wave along the archway going back. So we got, you know, USA chants and a wave going back through. So
Yeah.
it was definitely like a lot of energy. It's kind of like, you know, up to everyone's energy to have that kind of support from everyone out there helping us out the whole time we were out there.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, Team USA, they had a really great result. 12 runners going over 50, and eight of those going on to go over 72. And seven runners ran their best ever result in a backyard ultra. So, um, do you think like the team aspect played a big part in those results as people stand up or people get more fired up to do well in these team events?
I I I like to think so. I know my two best performances at Bigs were team years. When
Mm.
out of the three performances I've had there, my worst one was the individual year. But also just like seeing how how my teammates there, how they ran their race. Like I think if it had been an individual competition, a lot of them would have stopped earlier than they did.
Mhm.
Jen Roos, perfect example of that. Well, no, that she's not a perfect. She wouldn't have stopped. I take that back. She's not a perfect example of that. Doesn't matter whether it's for individuals. She's not quitting.
Yeah.
Um, but you know, she did keep on fighting on and build up yards. But it was John Knoll. John Knoll is a perfect example of that, actually, because it was the third night he was having some ankle issues, some kind of ankle injury flared up on him, and so he was struggling to make it in before the cutoff. And you know, I was talking to him, you know, trying to encourage him, keep him going. And he's like, "Yeah, I think I can make it. So I'm gonna just make it with a couple minutes." And he pulled it off and went back out for the next yard. And I was like, "Yeah, way to rally, man! You made it. Glad to see you made it. Let's see if we can get another one." He's like, "Yeah, yeah, I made it, but my reward is I get to do this again."
Yeah.
You know, it is like he's got just like this really like it's I don't know. John Knowles is like such a fun guy to run with, because he's not boisterous in any way. You know, he's like so solid though, so consistent, but he's just really humble guy about it, and you know, pretty quiet. But when you chat with him and run with him, you just kind of get this vibe that he's like super confident, but very like humble. Like it's a quiet confidence.
Mm.
But he kept on cranking out the yards that whole third night, even though he's like coming in with just a couple minutes to spare and fighting, you know, an ankle injury that was hurting him. And you know, he made the comment to me that if it weren't during that third night, that if it weren't for the team aspect, he would have he would have definitely pulled the plug by this point. But so I
Mm,
mean, he was doing it for the sake of the team to keep on cranking them out.
mm,
Chris Roberts is another good example of it because I mean he had another Achilles injury this year, and he was in a lot of pain, but he was still trying to crank out yards on that third day. And it was actually Keith was his race was wrapped up, but he found a boot to try and like patch him up like in the 2 minutes they had between yards to get Chris Roberts back out for another yard, and they tried to patch him up, but I think it was just like too much at that point. But
yeah,
I was sitting at a front row seat to seeing Keith like try and fit this boot support on him to try and support his Achilles and ankle and everything, and he was he was in an immense amount of pain and still fighting to go back out for the team.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I got a first hand well, I was there at the Australian race, watching and doing the live stream, and I got to see how important every single loop makes a difference because I mean you would know Australia just overtook
Yeah,
America to come second, and Australia had to like absolutely bust their ass to overtake you guys, and yeah, every single loop counts.
yeah, exactly. And we were kind of getting updates off and on as the race
Mm,
went on. So on the I think it was on the fourth day when it was down to like four of us, and then when it got down to the last three of us, we knew that Australia wasn't far behind, and we knew Phil Gore was still running. So we're like,
yeah.
well, we know as long as someone keeps going with him, there's a good chance that they're going to be able to catch up.
Mm,
So, but we knew we had to keep going as long as possible to try and like keep the lead. But yeah, it our as long as possible wasn't good enough this time around.
yeah. So who did you have crewing for you at this race?
Oh, I had well, I actually was struggling to find crew for this race.
Right.
Um, so I kind of I threw it out to our team's group chat that I was looking for crew. So if anyone knew anyone that wanted to be there and was looking to crew, like hook me up because as of right now, everyone I've asked has said that they're busy or they got something else going on.
Right.
So actually, Harvey Lewis hooked me up with one of his buddies who's looking to be there, Derek Tenen. So I got him lined up like maybe that was maybe a month before the race that I got that lined up. And then it was about 1 week before the race, one of our team members pulled out from the race. Dan out in Idaho,
Mm,
he had some kind of injury, so he's just like he decided, you know, for the sake of the team, it's probably best if he gives his spot up to someone else. So he pulled out from the race, which gave set up for the next one. But it turned out he had actually asked one of my buddies, to crew for him like a few days before I called and asked.
mm,
So that buddy of mine was already committed to crewing Dan for the race. And so once I found out Dan had pulled out of the race, I was like, okay, well, I know Jaron's available now, and he's
yeah.
planning to be there in a week. So I know he doesn't have plans.
Yeah.
So as I found, I was disappointed Dan wasn't going to be there because I love running with Dan, and I was ready to see him again. But as soon as I found out he wasn't going to be there, I gave my buddy Jaron a call, and as like, hey, you still up for crewing? Because I could use a second crew person because
Yeah.
one crew person is good, but two are better.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
so he jumped on it. He's like, yeah. He said, yep. If I'm crewing for you, I'll be there. So
Yeah.
Jaron Holmes, he jumped in and really helped me out, and I was really happy to have him because I was happy to have Derek, but at the same time, you know, when you haven't when you're got someone crewing for you that you've never met before, you're always like kind of uncertain, you know, how you're going to work together. But Jaron had crewed me at Capitol last year, and that was my last backyard PR. So I
Mm,
knew that we really clicked really well and that we worked really well together. So I was really, really happy to have him lined up and
mm,
know he was there for me to keep me going.
yeah. And is it a similar thing at the team world champs where like as individual at bigs where like you're only allowed to have one crew member at a time, or is there no space limits, so it's okay to have more than one?
Yeah, so for the team year, since it's only 15 runners, Laz allows you to have two crew members.
Mm,
He still limits it to two,
right.
but yeah, it's a lot better. It's a lot better than being limited to one
Yeah.
for the individual, because I mean, your crew is pretty stressed for sleep on those overnight portions, so it's really nice to have the second crew member available, so that way they can take shifts and at least get a decent nap with some unbroken sleep.
Yeah. So I remember when you're on last, I got the impression that that you used to go to races without any crew, and then you would just like happily accept help when people offered to jump in. So, but you must notice a big difference having a dedicated crew from go to wife.
Yeah, I'll say it does make a difference. It does make quite a difference. But
Yeah.
yeah, up to that point, I had just been I just just figure I'm gonna show up and go crewless and see how it goes. And for the first few backyards I did, it worked out all right. But when you start going into day two, day three, it gets a little tougher to not have a crew. It gets quite
Yeah.
a bit tougher. And I mean, honestly, like having the crew the first day too, it makes it so much less stress on you as a runner,
Mm.
and you're just able to get more done more efficiently. And I think you can make it through that first day with doing a lot less damage to yourself and keeping yourself in much better shape. So having the crew there for the first day, I mean, I'm sure I think I'd still be able to make it through the first day without a crew, but I wouldn't be in as good a shape and as well prepared to go into days, 2 and 3 or 4 if it goes that long. So I think it's just like all about whatever you can do to minimize the amount of damage you're doing to yourself in those early stages of the race, and having the crew there helps to minimize the amount of damage and stress you're going to do to yourself.
Yeah, and how much detail did you go into your race plan with the crew before the race started? Like, did you give them like a loop by loop kind of plan?
It's pretty minimal, really. I mean, Jaron crewed me enough for long enough at Capital that he kind of knew how I operate. So I was really happy to have him there because he knows how I'm going to operate and like how I'm going to work while I'm running. So, and I really just try and like keep the laps pretty consistent, and then it's usually for the most part the same routine between them. It's just like I'm usually just trying to like get in at least a little bit of solid food every time, and then you know if I'm sticking with like an electrolyte drink that I'm taking in my bottle, then I'll just go with the electrolyte. Or if I get tired of that, just get sick of the taste, and I switch to water, then I'll start taking some gels with me out on laps that have electrolytes and some extra calories to replace the electrolytes and calories that I'm not getting from the drink.
Yeah.
So it's really, yeah, I really don't have a real set plan. It's just kind of like a lot of it, so much of it for me is just based on feel.
Yeah, sure. So one of the really good things about the Sat Champs, or one of the beauties of it that makes it so different from most World Championship events, is that all the different countries all over the world run on their own courses. And because of this, there are all kinds of variables each country has to deal with. Like, and there would be positives and negatives for every single country involved, whether it be the course conditions or varying weather conditions. So, what would you say when it comes to the bigs course? What are the positives and what are the negatives?
One of the first positive that I'd say off the bat is just having a different day and night course. I find that a big positive, just mentally having that change to look forward to.
Mm.
I've done a few backyards that don't have a day and night course, and none of them went that long. But I having gone longer for backyards that have a day and night course, I just find having that it's not a finish line, but it's at least something to look forward to. it's a checkpoint to make it to. So just mentally having that, I think, is a huge help. So that's probably one of the biggest benefits of bigs, is knowing that you're going to switch surface every 11 or 13 hours.
Mm.
The challenge is the day course. I mean, that the trail is it's not an easy trail. It's got a decent amount of elevation change, and it's not like one long climb and one long descent. It's just a lot of small ones. So it's kind of like death by a thousand cuts, because you're never running really flat on the trail. It's usually either you're going slightly up, slightly down. There's one spot where there's really a standout climb and a standout descent, but other than that, it's just a lot of little ups and downs, and it's pretty technical. There's a lot of rocks and roots, a lot of opportunities to catch a toe and take a fall. So it's like you really have to be focused on foot placement like nearly the whole time you're on the trail. So that's probably the biggest challenge of the bigs course, I would say, is just the technicality and elevation change on that trail course.
Mm. And did you have to deal with any major weather events during the race, or was it all pretty good?
We had beautiful weather. The weather was great this year. It hadn't rained in a long time, so it's been pretty dry. So we were kicking up some dust. So that was kind of, that was a little bit of a pest, just like dealing with the dust. But it was nowhere near as bad as it was last year at the individual with 75 runners on the course.
Yeah.
That was like we were just running through a dust cloud constantly. Oh, it was bad.
Yeah.
There were so many nosebleeds last year.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was. Otherwise, yeah, that's probably the biggest part. The biggest weather. The first 2 nights got a little chilly overnight, a little bit cooler than I like. But then the third night was beautiful night to run. But temperature was perfect. I just had I think a long sleeve running shirt, and I felt great running through the third night.
Yeah.
Day temps got a little bit warm, but not like super, nothing like super uncomfortable. Just warm enough that it was warm enough that I put on an ice bandana and took my shirt off. But I felt pretty comfortable. Like once I got in the woods in the shade, I felt really comfortable just with the shirt off and ice bandana. I didn't feel like the heat was a huge factor.
Yeah, cool. So, there are so many aspects to get right in a backyard ultra, from like so many things like sleep, nutrition, chafing, blisters, foot care, everything. Was there a particular aspect to running a backyard ultra that you feel like you did better in this race at Bigs than ever before?
I wouldn't say one particular. It just felt like everything kind of was going well for me.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you do a backyard, you'll have like a couple good days and everything just kind of feels like it falls apart. This time it was just felt like everything was going well, and it never stopped going well. So it's just like nothing really stood out. Other than, I mean, if I had to pick one thing, it was just kind of like the motivation state, the kind of the mental game was really on point this time. I never felt like my motivation started to fall off. Like the motivation was there from beginning to end. I mean, even going into the fourth night, like the motivation was still there. That's the only time that the motivation started to falter a little was going into that fourth night. But even at that point, even though I felt like, I was kind of getting to the point where I'm not sure if I want to be doing this anymore. And I think some of that is like due to sleep deprivation.
Yeah.
But, I was still confident, a few hours into that fourth night, I was pretty confident I was going to be able to make it through a fourth night. So that was motivation for me to keep going in itself. Cause it was a distance PR for me and farthest I've ever been in a backyard. So I was like, well, I wanted to keep going and like see what is my limit here, and that's kind of like the beauty of the backyard. Is like everyone's always pushing for the limit. Yeah. And so that it was just, everything was going well for me. Like motivation was really on point, and just like having a positive attitude throughout, because sometimes it's not motivation, sometimes it's just like you got a crappy attitude and you start having a crappy attitude. It's like, well, it's probably not going to be too long before you decide that whatever little thing is going to annoy you and you don't want to do this anymore. And then there goes your motivation, and you start sabotaging your own race sometimes. So if I had to pick it, yeah, anything that stood out as like went really great for me during this, it was like just the mental game.
Yeah, cool. And after Capital, where the mental game kind of let you down, was that something that you were focusing on leading? Like, well, was that something you were thinking about leading into Bigs?
Yeah, I did think about it because that was one of my big worries was is it going to fall apart again? Between that and like the calf ankle pain flaring up, those were my two big concerns: was mental game, calf ankle pain. This time though, I decided if the calf and ankle pain flared up again, it was like my last race that I'm registered for, so I'm not gonna worry about the damage. I'm just gonna push on through it. So really, the mental game was the other big concern,
Mm.
and it really I for whatever reason was just on point this time around. I came up with a new mantra for myself shortly before, and it really powered me through. I think I started using it the second night because the second night I started having some quad pain that started bothering me on the road, and I felt like my pace was really falling off, even though I was like still even I felt like I was increasing my effort level, but my pace was declining, and I was just kind of like blaming that on the quad pain I was having that second night. So I flipped on, I reminded myself to flip on the mantra. And so the mantra is just to rejoice in your suffering. And I just started saying that to myself as I was running down the road in the dark. And it worked. It really did work. And I got through the night. The trail felt great on the third day. And when I got back to the road on the third night, I was hitting low points again, and same issue. Extra quad pain, feeling like I was like coming in slower times, more effort, and I went back to the mantra, and it got me through the night again. So
Mm. I remember that when we spoke on the first podcast, you mentioned that you felt like you were coming down with maybe the flu or something like that before the Sat Champs. In the days leading into this race, were you feeling like you were ready? Like, did you feel like you were ready to run the race of your life?
I I wasn't at that point. I was hopeful, but I I felt like the training was good. I didn't do quite as many miles building up to it as I did last year.
Mm.
So I was like I did about the same number of miles as I did 2 years ago. So I knew the miles were there to do really well because that's when I did my uh, did pretty well. And but it's just I wasn't going into it super confident.
Yeah.
It was just I had the goal of wanting to do the best that I could for the team and go as far as I could. And thankfully, like I getting sick like a day or two before the race is always like one of my biggest fears now because yeah, 2 years ago I was had a pretty bad cold and congestion, like came down with it like a week or two before the race. And when I went to the race, I was still hacking up my lungs, and I had to pull over to the side of the trail a few times just to hack up some congestion and stuff. And it was ugly. So after 3 days of it 2 years ago, that's what I was like, I got to pull the plug out of this. I can't do this anymore.
Mm.
But yeah, this year it was like I'm always a little nervous about my overall health and getting sick. And it's like the timing of bigs too, being in October. It's like the kids have just gone back to school, and then the weather's changing, so it's usually like when all the kids are getting sick
Mm.
after going back to school and sharing all their germs with one another.
Yeah.
It's just like that's when one of my kids is always going to get sick, and then with one of them get sick, it goes to the whole family. And then I'm just like, well, if it's in the house a month before a race, I'm probably going to get it at some point.
Yeah.
So that's always like one of my biggest fears is just the timing of when they get sick and how long is it going to take before I pick it up and get it cleared out. But this year, thankfully, we were all in really good health, so it didn't affect the race at all. So I was super thankful for that.
Mm, mm, excellent. So I've had a look at the times you were running each loop. And as far as times you were running from about the yard 53, there were a few slower loops in there, even like a 58-minute loop. So were you always in control, or were you purposely running some slower loops for whatever reason? Or do you remember running those slower loops?
Yeah, I think the 58-minute loops, those were, I think, on the fourth day on the trail. There were, I think that's when it got down to it was just Piotr and Megan and I. And actually, what happened was after Harvey dropped, Megan was actually was struggling a bit. I think she was having some dehydration issues. So we had a couple talks and we decided to run as a team for a few yards because she was struggling. I think she was struggling pretty hard. She said she was struggling, and so she actually suggested that we run as a group to kind of like take the mental game off of having to set pace and pick your path, pick your footsteps. If sometimes it can kind of help just like following someone if all you have to do is like stare at their feet and just follow their feet, not think about pace or anything. So we did that for I think like about 3 or 4 yards, and so that's when I think Piotr and I we kind of each slowed our pace down a bit, and we ran as a team. And a couple of those times we cut it pretty close. I think yeah, like a couple of 58-minute laps, which is that's a little closer than I like. I'm not comfortable with that. Like that's when I start getting nervous and worried if I'm coming in. Just the mental part of like coming in after the first 3-minute warning whistles. That I don't like that. I mean, it's enough time to get in and turn around and get back out, but it just something about like mentally, like when you hear the warning whistle when you aren't there yet, I think that kind of like flips a switch where you think you're behind schedule before even going out.
Mm.
But I think we did that for a few hours, and then Megan started recovering a bit. I think she got some good hydration, and she kind of got back on schedule. So after I think she'd recovered. We all decided that we'll just all kind of run our own race again, whatever pace is good for us. Because I mean, honestly, like I was saying earlier, even whether it's individual or a team competition, when you're in the team competition, if you're going to run your best race by running a pace different than your teammates, I mean, it makes sense to do that, because if you're going to last longer for your team by running that pace, you're benefiting the team. So we said, okay, well, we'll all just kind of go back to running whatever feels like our natural pace to keep going as long as possible. And I think, and after that, I picked up the pace a little bit, but it wasn't a huge change. It's probably only like a couple minutes, if anything.
Yeah. So yeah, like I mean, your assist was Megan Eckert, who's an absolute superstar, I reckon. And this is only her first year running backyard ultras as well. It was down to just the two of you from the 81st yard. So what were those 7 hours like when it was just the two of you?
We were kind of running different paces, so we didn't run together a whole lot. We ran more like just on the road out and back to start the day loops. But then after that, once we got on the trail, like our paces switched up a little bit. But when it got down to the two of us, we were both really surprised when Piotr dropped, because he was looking really strong. I thought he was going to be in it, through into the fourth night. And I'm still not sure exactly what happened to him, like what exactly caused him to drop when he did. So we were both really shocked when it did come down to just the two of us. But yeah, so then at that point I was like, well, I don't know what this means for like as far as our team performance. Like, does this mean that Australia is gaining on us every hour now? So kind of that was one thing going on in the back of my mind. But then also at the same time, I was like, well, I mean, I'm just going to try and keep going as long as I can. And I knew we only had a few more day loops at that point. So I felt safe. I was sure I could make it through the rest of the day loops without timing out. But my biggest concern then I guess it wasn't about the team or who I was running with. It was just like kind of like wondering what my legs were going to do when I switched back to the road. Because I mean, as much as I look forward to a change of surface, you're always kind of like, well, how are my legs going to react when I go from the trail to the road to the trail? Are my legs going to just like feel like they're dead?
Mm.
So honestly, that was my biggest thought for those last few day laps when it came down to just Megan and I. And so then when we got back to the road, my legs felt okay, and I ran the first night lap, pretty comfortably with about 5 minutes to spare, I think.
Mm.
And at that point, I was like, okay, well, I guess my legs are going to be okay. Now it's like, am I going to be getting in with enough time to still get some sleep? What's sleep deprivation going to do at this point? Am I going to make it in? And after a few hours, though, I was just, I realized that I was pretty confident I could make it through the fourth night at that point. So then it just came down to whether Megan was going to keep going or not, because I was pretty sure I was going to keep going through the night.
Yeah.
And it got really questionable because she cut it really close. I think even it was the first or second night lap. She
Right.
cut it pretty close, and that was the first indication to me, like, is she struggling? That's the first indication I had that she was struggling at all, because
Yeah.
she was getting stronger for those last couple of day laps, and I was thinking that she was going to do really well on the road. And I was basing that on, like, she had a really impressive 6-day performance at 6 days in the dome.
Mm.
So after, like, knowing what she could do for a 6-day race on a flat surface, and the road's more flat than the trail, I thought once she got back to the road, I thought she was just going to be in that like 6-day mode where she could just like crank out 4 miles an hour, no problem.
Yeah.
So I thought if we got back to the road, I thought she was going to go through the night. I didn't have much doubt that she was going to be able to make it through the night. So I was surprised when she started struggling when she did.
Yeah. It's a pretty good first year for a backyard ultra runner, isn't it?
She's had a pretty amazing first year as a backyard. I mean, she got the silver ticket at the Suhero Showdown out there,
Yeah.
and I think that was her first backyard. I think it's like 250 miles. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, that's pretty impressive for her first backyard. I mean, and then I mean, her first, that was her first 6-day too that she ran at 6 days in the dome,
Mm.
and I think I think she was like pushing to threaten Camille Herron's record that she had just set for the 6 days. I think she wasn't far from that.
Yeah.
I think it was like her second or third day she slowed down a bit. But I think if her second or third day during that 6-day performance was better, I think she could have taken Camille's record.
Yeah.
I was talking to her a bit on the trail one day about that. She's like, "Yeah, that's definitely on my radar." So
Yeah.
I think it's only a matter of time before she gets that 6-day record. I think she's going to go. I think she's going to go after it, and I definitely think she's got the ability to get it. So
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
it's a matter of when or where she gets it.
Yeah. So I understand she started Loop 88, but turned back not long after she started. When did you realize that she'd done that?
I didn't realize it until I was probably. I didn't realize it until I was within hearing range of camp.
Right.
I didn't want to believe that it was almost over, because it was just a couple yards earlier. I had gone to the out and back on the night course. I turned around and there's no headlamp. And I was like, "Oh, what happened?" And then I'm running back. I'm like, "Oh, this is strange. No sign of her, no headlamp." And then I finally see a headlamp, and she's probably maybe a third of a mile from the turnaround.
Right.
And I stopped just for a second. We stopped and talked just for a second. And she said she had some issues to get going that lap, and that she didn't think she was going to make it. So I immediately, I was just like, "All right, well, don't waste your time." She's like, "I had issues get going. I don't think I'm going to make it. I'm going to try, but I don't think I'm going to make it." I was like, "Well, don't waste your time talking to me to explain it. Just go to get to the turnaround and try and make it. And then, yeah, we can talk when we go out on the next one." So we had a very brief conversation there in passing, couple sentences. And that was the first time I thought, well, this might be close to this might be close to being the end of the race.
Mm.
But I didn't want to believe it too early, or because it's like that mental game with the backyard. It's like if you set a finish line for yourself, then it's kind of like your body's going to shut down because it's like, well, we're there, we're done, we don't have to do this anymore. So I got back from that yard, and like everyone at the timing tent was talking about, oh yeah, she's not gonna make it. She's not gonna. And I was like, how do you know that? How do you know she's? I like stopped before finishing my yard, and I like started arguing with everyone in the timing tent. I was like, well, why are you guys saying that? She was only maybe a third of a mile from the turnaround.
Mm.
If she runs a decent pace, she's gonna make it. So please don't say that, because I don't want to hear it, and then think that my race is over, think I don't have to go out for another yard, and then have to get up out of my chair when I'm like, oh, this isn't over.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like that was kind of just mentally, that was the toughest point of the race for me, because I heard people saying, oh, she's not going to make it. It's over. And so I sat down, kind of had that in my head, thinking, oh, I might not have to go back out. I can take a real nap. I can lay down and rest. And she came in with like a minute and a half. So that was like the first point. I was like, kind of like thinking, man, it'd be nice to just go to sleep tonight and not have to run through the night. And then the next yard she went out after that, she cranked out like her regular pace again. So I was like, okay, so whatever bothered her before seems like she's addressed it, and she's back on her schedule. And so she ran that one, and we ran about the same pace. She was just maybe a minute or so behind me that time. And then it was the next one, the last one, I think that was 87. Then we went out for 88, and I don't know if it was that one or 87, where it was shortly after we went out the driveway. She stopped and like went down and grabbed her calf, and I stopped and turned back and just like made sure everything was okay, making sure she didn't just like have some injury happen right there. But she said she was just having calf pain and that it was going to work itself out. So I was like, okay, well, good. Well, I'm going to finish my yard. And so I just kept running at that point. And then when I turned around again, no headlamp again. So I started thinking, well, yeah, maybe she stopped and turned back. So the whole way back, though, I didn't want to like get my hopes up again, thinking that the race was almost over, that we were done. But so I kept on like coming up, and the sleep deprivation was a big thing at that point. So I started coming up with all these crazy thoughts of how maybe I ran by her and like I just forgot about it, or maybe she hopped off maybe she hopped off the road for a second to make a pit stop, and I didn't see her when I ran by. And then one point I was thinking, well, maybe Laz changed the course and he sent her the other way on the road to do an out and back in the opposite direction. Like it was like, and that was kind of a crazy thought, but it seemed pretty logical at the time, and it sounded like something Laz would do anyway. Yeah. So I was like, maybe it happened. Maybe I'll be back, and she'll be there, and she'll have done her yard in the opposite direction. So it wasn't until I was like within hearing distance that I was like not far from Laz's driveway, and I heard them shouting for me. And so it was my one of my crew guys. It was Derek and Jaron, and they were shouting, and I started yelling back, is it over? Is it actually almost over this time? And they're both, yeah, it's done, buddy. All you got to do is cross the line. So that's the first time I knew for certain that we were done.
Yeah. And what did it feel like to know that you were the last one standing and you got to hold that gold coin?
Yeah, it was a pretty big moment. It felt pretty good. I'll be honest. It felt pretty good. I mean, I know it's a team event this year, but I don't know, just like me running bigs, like just being there to run bigs had been a dream for years before ever being there. And I never thought really that I'd be the last one at bigs, whether it be a team year or an individual year. So for it to all play out like it did, and for me to have like string together the few days of running that I pulled together this year, I mean, it was pretty surreal to be in that moment and be the last one there at bigs. yeah, it was pretty meaningful. It was felt like a lot felt like the stars aligned for it to happen, for everything to work out as well as it did with the crew I had, and my wife at home, supporting me and taking care of the kids while I'm away, and all the training runs that she's watched the kids for, like always caring for the kids while I'm out on training runs and everything else. It's just like a lot of sacrifices, a lot had to come together to make it happen. So
Mm.
really, I was just like super grateful in the moment for everything to have gone so well.
Yeah, yeah, awesome. I saw there's some really nice photos of you sitting in the chair, like, and you just look like the happiest person on earth. Yeah,
It felt like a long road to get there. And not
yeah,
not just the 4 days and 3 nights of running that were immediately before it. It felt like a long road before that,
yeah,
like years in the making. So it was a pretty great experience, and just really felt really good to kind of to just have everything fall into place so perfectly for those few days.
yeah, unreal. Um, so I know you're a big Backyard Ultra fan, and you're often posting polls and questions about the format online. So I do have a couple of questions about the format in general, just to hear your thoughts. But where do you see the future of Backyard Ultras headed?
Definitely going to be an Olympic event.
Yeah.
I say that jokingly.
Yeah.
It'd be really cool if it was, though. I
Yeah.
mean, I say that jokingly. I don't honestly think it's going to happen, but man, it would be cool. I
Mm.
mean, like, think about my dream is it'd be like the first yard would be during the like opening ceremony,
Yeah.
the opening parade of the Olympics. So all the backyard runners would run the opening, the first yard with the opening parade for the
Yeah.
opening ceremony. And then, they could just check in with live coverage like the whole week of
Yeah.
like a week is going on. And it'd be the longest Olympic event ever.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, I kind of doubt that'll happen, but it'd be really cool if it did. But I don't know. I think it's going to continue to grow. I mean, you just look at like how much it's increased in the last few years. I think it's just going to grow. So, I mean, I don't know what that means as far as like whether there's going to be more sponsorship opportunities or more support, if it's going to be like more well known. Because I mean, it's kind of a niche category of ultra running, which is kind of a niche category
Yeah.
of running in general. So,
Yeah.
we're kind of a minority here, us backyard runners. But I think it based on how much it's grown just in the last like few years, it's only going to get bigger, I think. And I think that's a good thing because that's going to get more people involved. I think it's a good format for people to run farther than they thought they could. So, and I think it's interesting to even people who aren't really interested in running in general. I think just it's kind of such a unique format that even non-runners can take an interest in it and
Yeah.
see some entertainment value in it.
Yeah, definitely. And you often see people who are non-runners helping crew at the events, and they really love it.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that happened. That's a lot too. Is like like you get a lot of really passionate people who crew for the runners at backyards, who for whatever reason they aren't able to run like they used to run, like whether it's life circumstances or physical reasons, they aren't able to run the distances or the volume that they used to or that they would like to. And so then they kind of being crewing at a backyard is some way that they can still be a part of it. and
Mm.
and I think it's kind of a beautiful thing for it to work out that way, because that way there's still a part of the community and still supporting all the runners at the same time,
Mm.
and be involved in that way.
Yeah. So with this Olympics thing, I mean, you've spent a few hours in Laz's company. Have you ever asked him what does he think about it becoming an Olympic sport?
I haven't, no.
Right.
I'll save that for the next time I'm
Yeah.
around last. So I'll be sure to remember that one next
Yeah.
chance I get to hang out with them.
Yeah. Um, so 110 yards now is the world record. Um, do you see it being broken anytime soon, or do you think it will be the world record for a while?
You know, I'm I'm thinking if it isn't broken in the next, uh, I'm thinking if it's not broken at Dead Cow Gully next, what is that, next year, the next Dead
Yeah.
Cow, because there's a pretty stacked list of runners there. Harvey, Phil Gore, Sam Harvey. I mean, and I think Tim Walsh is kind of like gunning to try and like have the world record set at his
Yeah.
race.
Yeah.
So I mean, with good reason, and I really appreciate everything he's done for the backyard format in the sport because he's a huge supporter, and I think he's really helping to grow it and get a reach a wider audience too. So if it doesn't happen there though, which I think is good, it's possible, you know. Oh, and all the Belgian runners are going to be there too, right? Evo and Ren.
Yeah.
I think they're both signed up. So there's enough runners that are capable of breaking it that are going to be at Dead Cow. So maybe it just comes down to like what the conditions are there
Yeah.
for the days of race, that whether it's broken or not.
Mm.
But if it doesn't happen there, I think 2 years from now we'll be seeing the Belgian team break it again, and whether it's two or three of them again, I think I think there's a good chance they'll push it beyond where it is and finish as a team again, which is pretty cool to see them do that. So if that happens again, that'll be cool to watch.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember last time you were on, you had no realistic plans of traveling overseas for races, but have you considered jumping on a plane with the family and having a holiday in Queensland, Australia, and also running at Dead Cow Gully?
I would like to. I mean, no concrete plans of it though, but I mean that's like of all the international like races, that's probably that's probably right up there at the top of the list to make it to Dead Cow.
Yeah, awesome. Um, and I know for sure you'll be at the individual world championships at Bigs next year.
Yeah, so I've got the guaranteed spot now, so I've got that. Um so yeah, I'll most likely be there. I've really, you know, going into the bigs this year, I wasn't sure if I'd have a spot, so I really wasn't making plans for it next year.
Mm.
But now that I've got the guaranteed spot, I'd say there's pretty good chance. I mean, I don't see any reason why I wouldn't be there at this point. I didn't make any plans to do anything else,
Yeah,
so I'm planning to be there. And I mean, honestly, it seems like we're gonna have a pretty small number of Americans at the individual in 2025. Just, you know, with the entries from all the other countries and with the really high bar set for the at-large list. I mean, it's just I think as of right now, there's 4 Americans,
mm.
including me, who will have a spot at an individual. So yes, it'll kind of feel like I'm kind of looking at it as not just like me going there as an individual, but you know, even though it's an individual race, I think you're still kind of representing your country on the world stage there. So I'm kind of looking at it as another opportunity to run and represent the U.S.
Yeah,
Which I mean that was a big motivation for me on 2 years ago and this year for the teams events is like it's a really cool opportunity to be able to say like you are on a national team and running for your to represent your country on an international stage. So I'll go into bigs next year kind of with that same mindset.
yeah, awesome. Yeah, like that at large list, it's I think it's a minimum of 82 at the moment. So after after another year worth of races, it's probably going to get a little bit higher.
Yeah, I imagine so. I mean, I mean, there's not a whole lot of races that even go beyond 80 yards,
Mm.
but I think a few will. And I mean, the one other factor like that might, you know, change that minimum qualification for the at large is how many of the top finishers from the international teams are going to take their spot. So
Yeah,
that could change it a bit too, because I mean it's a bit of a commitment to travel overseas for one of these races. So, um, so I don't think it's going to. I mean, we had a really good showing last year
Mm.
with all the international runners. So I think there's definitely a drive and motivation for them to all come to Tennessee and run the Bigs course. So maybe the majority of them will be there, and that really high at large mark will stay about the same. But it's tough to say if it'll change a little bit or not. But
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I remember last year the number kept getting lower and lower because runners would drop out. So
yeah,
I reckon probably about 80 will be about the cutoff for bigs next year.
yeah. I figure it'll probably be somewhere around there.
Yeah. And Capital, you'll be at Capital next year?
You know, I not sure at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
You know, Biggs was the last race that I was officially registered for before it, and I just I wanted to have a good day there, and I wasn't making plans. I didn't have any plans for what I was going to do next year, and so I'm just kind of right now just enjoying the fact that I had a really good race, and will I haven't decided what I want to commit to next year yet. So, but Capital is definitely high on the list. I mean,
Yeah.
I tell everyone that if they're going to run a backyard, they should run a Capital, because the race director, Sarah Smith, she does just such an amazing job with that race.
Mm.
The course is like super friendly. It's non-technical. It's a fun, fast course. So, I highly recommend that race to anyone interested in backyards, whether they're backyard veterans or first-time backyard runners. That's a great race, and the atmosphere of the whole race is really good. The start finish area, all the support beginning to end. She's got two actual chefs that do all the cooking for the food to support the runners. So she really does set the race to go as far as possible. She keeps the runners as happy and well fed as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. It looks awesome, and the results speak for how well it's all set up, I guess.
Yeah, and I think it was 2 years. I think it was in 23.
Right.
We had some thunderstorms overnight, and the race director Sarah, she was like, as we were coming in from the rain during one of the yards, she has a camper van that she uses for when she sets up at her races, and she was bringing out like these fluffy warm towels for us to dry off when we came in from the rain. So
Yeah.
it was like these 5-star hotel, like warm, fluffy towels. We were coming in from running second or third night, and we were like being greeted with warm, fluffy towels to dry off. I was like, wow, this is really,
Yeah.
really pampered. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's unreal. So Scott, you probably know I like asking my guests for their 3 backyard ultra tips on the podcast now. So, what are your 3 backyard ultra tips?
Just immediately, the first one that comes to mind is your crew. Your crew is like so essential.
Mm.
Having crew that knows you, knows what to say to you. And I mean, like, I think about like the other guys, Levi Yoder and John Knoll on the US team. Their wives crew them, and I mean, it's like, what a perfect crew partnership that they have, because their wives know what to say to them to keep them going, and they're there to support them every step of the way. So it's really great when it works out that your partner can be your crew. But if your partner isn't available to be your crew because you got 4 kids that she's taking care of while you're out running, having a buddy that knows you well and has crewed you before and you work really well with, that's a really huge benefit to keep you going through the low point if you hit them.
Yeah. And
Let's
before
see.
you go on to the second point, that reminds me. I saw that Carolyn Yoder, she actually ran 24 yards in a backyard ultra a few months ago as well, so she can run backyards and crew backyards. So that's pretty good.
Yeah, and it was Levi. Levi was a recruiter for it, so
Right.
he got a they got to reverse roles for one backyard. And
Yeah.
yeah, I talked to him a little bit at Bob's about that, and he's like, yeah, it's kind of fun crewing for her. So
Yeah.
he seemed to enjoy being the crew person as well as the runner. So,
Yeah.
and honestly, I think it's like probably just made them, they're like the backyard power couple,
Mm.
like, so it probably makes her a better crew person, having experience what it's like to do 100 miles in a backyard
Yeah.
to really help push Levi through some of the times when he hits low points.
Yeah, sure. Um, so that was your number one. What's number two?
Number two is positive, just I'd say positive attitude and keeping a strong mental game, because so much of the backyard is just like it's you can only train so much and be physically fit, but at some point it just comes down to like your mental game, whether you're going to keep going or not, whether those aches and pains and muscle fatigue is going to happen and you're going to have to push through it. So
Mm.
it's all on your mental game to keep going at that point. So that'd be number two.
Yeah.
um and the mantra I used was a huge part of what kept me going. Just I just kept on telling myself, rejoice in your suffering, rejoice in your suffering. And it worked for me to keep me going. So,
Yeah.
and then the last one, I don't know. The last one, I guess I'd go with just like nutrition and hydration. I mean, that's probably a pretty common one to say, but I mean, it's common because it's so important. I mean, if your nutrition and hydration is off, you're not going to last. I
Mm.
mean, you're going to get hydrated or you're going to run out of energy. So, being able to consume food and calories that work for you, that you can digest while you're on the move, and then just making sure you're taking in liquid calories and staying hydrated. I mean, that's essential to be able to keep going. So that'd be my number three
Yeah.
important one to be able to, if you're going to go far, you got to get those figured out. And
Yeah.
it's so case by case for everyone, that you got to figure out what works for you.
Mm. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Well, look, thanks so much for coming on again, Scott, and congratulations on your last one standing performance at Bigs. I'm really, really happy for you. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what else you can do, especially at Bigs again next year.
Yeah, thank you, Pato. Yeah, thanks for having me on again. It was a good time, and yeah, I haven't figured out exactly, but yeah, Biggs is on the list for next year, so hopefully I
Yeah.
can have another day. And
Yeah.
with the individual competition, I think the runners will be there to push it beyond where I went this year. So hopefully I can string together another, 3 or 4 really good magic days that feel magical, and I'll be able to find out whether I can push through that fourth night or not. See if my confidence this time was true or not. Like that if the runners were there, if I could have made it through that fourth night. So that's a big curiosity for me to figure out next year. So
Yeah.
look forward to the challenge.
Awesome. And now you also do a bit of blogging as well on the internet. So people can read all about your races and training and stuff on your blog, right?
Right, yeah. So I do race reports and just a few blog posts, usually between race reports, and that's all on at beastcoasttrailrunning.com.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Well, thanks again for coming on. We'll definitely be in touch and all the best. Don't go anywhere. I'll just hit stop on the recording, okay?
All right, great. Thank you, Pato.
All
Great
right.
talking to you again.
You too.